Today on Things You Should Know, we're going to be discussing one of the top 5 Googled questions of 2020, and that is, what is love? So hang around. Here at Things You Should Know podcast, our focus varies from commonly asked questions like, what are the top email apps for iPhone users? Or how much does it cost to go to Disney World anyway? To the trending topics of the day, such as, are taxes going up or down? And who's Elon Musk? We shed light on things you probably have always wondered about, but you never got around to investigating them yourself. This podcast brings you the answers to your most commonly asked questions and makes you smarter just by listening. Information empowers, and the more information you have, the better decision you can make, and ultimately, your quality of life is based on the decisions you make. So, thanks for joining the discussion, and make sure that you subscribe today and not miss out on any future episodes of Things You Should Know. Hey guys, welcome to the show. This is Kelly, your host, and you've reached Things You Should Know. If today is your first time listening to this podcast, go ahead and subscribe. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so that 2 days from now, when we have new content, you can be the first to listen. Those of you who continue to come back and support the podcast, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support. Please make sure you continue to share, like, and subscribe. Share, like, and subscribe. As well, we'll ask that you please give us a review. It really helps us out to be found by other potential listeners on our podcasting platform. So thank you. So let's get into it. Periodically, we'll look at Google Trends and see what people are interested in. And one of the articles that I source from time to time are the top 100 questions, the who, what, whens, and hows of Google from 2019 to 2020 and also 2020. And one of the questions we decided to tackle today, I'm going to talk about what is love. How many people around the world within a month's time do you think are Googling what is love? Well, according to this Google Trends data, it's almost 2 million people. So we did a podcast not long ago on a question that I never thought would be Googled so much. It's really one of the top questions, and it came out of the blue, or at least for me it did. And that is, what is my IP address? I never knew so many people were Googling for their IP address. So anyway, I know people are looking for this information. So we're going to jump into it today, and I think you're going to enjoy it because we're going to go in a couple different directions, and we ought to hit you at some point in terms of your definition of what love is. So let's get going. So, eHarmony.com, Farmers Only, all of these guys have some idea because that's their product. They're selling this connection, this love, and these sorts of things. So we checked those sites out, and we also checked out, Pure Definitions. We checked out lifehack.com, conversation.com, a couple different places to bring you this information today. So those are some of the sources that we utilize. So let's talk about just a general definition. Of, or how can we define love? Because you're going to see, the more we talk about this, the grayer, if you will, the grayer the answer may get for you. So, for example, when we love someone, we experience the same positive thoughts and experiences as when we like a person. We also experience a deep sense of care and commitment towards that person as well. So being, quote, in love includes all of the above, but it involves some sexual feelings, some arousal, some attraction, like that's spice in the soup. So that's one way to do it. This is from lifehack.com. The next one, love means to be deeply committed and connected to someone or something. The basic meaning of love is to feel more than liking towards someone. It's a bond that two people share. There are a few things you need to avoid when building a new relationship, like being too demanding. Okay, they're getting into somewhere else. But their different definitions of love are a little different, similar but a little different. So this has to do with emotion mostly. So if that's what you believe love to be, I'm not going to say right or wrong. Again, we're beyond right or wrong on this podcast. We're only discussing facts for the most part. But love is not something that can be considered a fact or factual, or can be proven or disproven scientifically. In my opinion, it is subjective. We all feel differently about most things. For example, you may say, I love the Dallas Cowboys. Well, what type of love is that? Or I love to travel, or I love my kids, or I love the color blue. I love my car. I love my job, these sorts of things. So we, as human beings, a lot of times we misappropriate and misuse, overuse certain words. And so after a while, the meaning becomes confusing, convoluted, and it can mean a couple different things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's see what eHarmony has to say. Since eHarmony is one of these bigger online platforms for people to find dating, so obviously love is going to be in regard to some level of relationship. Well, speaking of relationship, before we get into eHarmony, if this is your first time, I think ongoing listeners have heard me describe who I am in terms of my history. But I've been married for 24 years this year, and I was married in my 20s. And my wife and I were dating 2 years prior. We have 3 kids. We've been together for 26 years. And so I have a little experience, and I say that facetiously, I have a little experience as relates to relationship. This is my first marriage, my only marriage. So I do have a different perspective on relationships now as a 50-year-old versus when I was 27 and when I got married, or when I was 24 when I started dating my wife. I have a different perspective on a lot of things in my life, and love being one of them. And I'm going to, if you allow me to, I'm going to share those with you today. But I'm going to kind of give you the information that was used in the research so that you can kind of follow along, understand where I'm going. So let's see what eHarmony has to say. Love is one of the most profound emotions we experience as humans. It's bigger than us, meaning though we can invite it into our lives, we do not have the control over how, when, where, or who love starts to express itself through. And according to this data, 72% of people believe in love at first sight. Okay? Are you someone who believes in love at first sight? For me, no. I do not believe in love at first sight. That's the tricky thing about love. We can feel it in a variety of different states, mental states. When we're happy, when we're sad, when we're angry, confused, excited, etc. And our attitudes about love can range from the affectionate, the affectionate type of love, to infatuation, which most people love and are intoxicated with, and pleasure. We even use love as an action verb, as a force to keep our relationships with our partners or our friends or family, to keep everything together. The ancient Greeks used 7 words to describe this one emotion, this one word. So this is how complex this word actually is. They used the word storage. It's like our storage, and the meaning of that was natural affection. Philia, Philia, which is the friendship love. Eros, are the root word for erotic. So it's sexual and erotic or erotica. Agape, which is closer to a spiritual or religious type of meaning of love, unconditional and divine love. Ludus, Ludus, which is flirting, flirtatious love. Pragma, committed or married love. Philia, which sort of sounds like fellatio, but I don't know if that is the same root word. Self-love. So the Greeks use all of these terms to describe what this one emotion meant to them. Now, there are very many different kinds of love to experience, but I believe the people that are searching and Googling this term are more than likely looking for a romantic type of love. That's usually the majority of what people are searching for. So, for example, if you say, I really love my best friend, people don't really seek out a best friend to love, like in their life. They're not, I can't wait till I get 25 years old and I meet my best friend and I begin to love my best. No, people are waiting till they get 25 or 30 these days, and so they can meet the love of their life. Usually is a romantic sort of situation. People are not searching out necessarily a pet that they can fall in love with, or a car, or some section of town, or even some job. They're really looking for a job that fits them, and their education is going to benefit them throughout their lives. But I don't know if they're necessarily looking for it from a standpoint of love. So when people are searching for love, I would say primarily, given my experience, and I'm just putting it out there, I would think they're looking for the romantic, the affectionate, the expressive love on some level. Some level, maybe we're all seeking. The reason being, the majority of us find fulfillment through the comfort of a deeply committed and romantic relationship. So we're going to come back in a different time in a different podcast to really segment a lot of what this information is pointing to. It's not saying it, but it's pointing to. So let me give you an example. This suggests that the reason why people feel like they have to have love in their lives is that they're going to be incomplete if they don't. This is also, according to them, 88% of Americans cite that love as being the top reason they choose to get married. Well, I'll also tell you, as someone who's been married for 20, going on 24, 25 years, is that this is the same reason why so many people get the divorce. Because they don't know what love is. At the offset in your early stages, you're going with this strong feeling, and you think this is an indication of something, and you don't really know. I'm at the age where I can look back, and I can see myself in my 20s, and I know how little I knew then. I didn't know it then, of course. I just know it now. And so when I see myself in my 20s and I relive or can revisit some of the things that I thought and the patterns I used to have and the ideology and the methodology I use in my life, it's a wonder. I didn't dig deeper holes and make more mistakes, but my philosophies have changed over the years, and I don't believe really much of what I believed in my 20s now. I don't. Why? Because life has given me the opportunity to use a scientific method on myself. In other words, I've had experiences and I have been able to determine what information needs to stay and what information needs to go. For example, if you're in your 20s, and where I was when I got married, and you're healthy, I'm just giving you a hypothetical. This didn't really happen to me. So I'm going to give you a hypothetical. So I'm in my 20s and I have a healthy body. So perhaps I think that this is always going to be the case, that my body is going to be healthy and that I'm always going to have the mobility of this body. Well, in my 30s, perhaps maybe I have an accident or I'm injured in some way, and I lose the mobility of my body. In my 20s, perhaps I thought that this was the ultimate thing, my physique, my body. This is what I identified with. And I saw that people identified me through because it was a beautiful physique. It was something that was very attractive. Well, in my 30s, it became less so. So now I'm at the point of being in my 40s where I say, how important are physical attractions? Where is my real value? Who am I really? And so the difference between me being 20 and 40 is my different perspective and my paradigm shift on how I value myself and how I allow or how I see others' perception of me. So that was a long example just to say things change over time. So many things you think today, you more than likely over time, it will be challenged. Some things will stay, but I will tell you many things will go. And unfortunately, if you live in the West and you see the number of divorces, I mean, you see these grand weddings all the time, especially now on social media. Everybody's doing so much. But the divorce rate is so incredibly high. So, according to Match, I almost said Match.com, this is eHarmony, 88% of Americans cite that love as being the top reason for them to get married. And unfortunately, I would say, unless you're getting married later in life, and maybe you've been through a couple marriages before, many of us, including myself, when we first get married, we've no real idea what love is. We think we know because we've been told what it is by people who themselves probably didn't know, but we didn't really know. So anyway, I'm rambling. So let's get on into some additional definitions. So let's look at love as chemistry. So what is love if it involves chemistry? From the scientific point of view, love is powerful and a permanent neurological condition. It's chemistry and it's not something that you can necessarily control. Take, for example, the difference between lust and love, which is a big reason why relationships fail. And it's my opinion that, particularly men cannot distinguish the difference, the emotional difference between actual love and lust. And many times we will be in relationships with someone that we have a strong desire for physically, but from an actual agape, unconditional love standpoint, those are two very different things. So while we don't want to lose this person from a sexual sense, we keep them around. We don't want to even think about someone else touching or having sex with them. So we become territorial and we think that, okay, we married this person becomes ours. Well, that's really not like love. That's more lust. Like I'm confusing my attachment, my desire to have her or him, mainly because I don't want anybody else to have them. I want to have them to myself, so I must love them. Well, not necessarily. It sounds more like lust to me. And I'm going to give you my definition of love once we go through all of this, but I'm just giving you these examples. So lust is a temporary desire and is fueled by testosterone, estrogen. It lasts for a little bit. But when you feel true love, according to eHarmony, the brain can release a whole different set of chemicals that we're going to go into that gives you a little different expression of the emotion. So here they say, what is love? Love is commitment. I completely disagree with that. Love is not commitment. Love is not commitment, in my opinion. But according to them, love is commitment. Love is so hard to define because it doesn't exist as one thing. We can feel love for our significant others, our parents, our friends, children, and pets. Some of us direct our love toward God or celebrities, or we can hold love for our neighbors, our country, etc. Love can be blind, it can be misguided, tragic, unconditional, steadfast, and inconsistent. It takes on many different variants, yet, at its best, love is a passionate commitment that we constantly work to develop and nurture. Yeah, I've got a little bit of issue with that. I agree. Yeah, you can love significant others and parents and friends and these sorts of things, but love, in my experience, and commitment are two different things. They're two very different things. So here, love is infatuation. When you take away the aspect of commitment, love is infatuation. When you're no longer passionate about someone, you're simply dedicated to him or her. Love that is infatuation is not really good love because, well, we often let our obsession become the root of the relationship, which might mean you're focusing more on the idea of being in love or the idea of being in a relationship than an actual relationship itself. And I've seen this so many times. I've been married long enough. So this is not everybody, okay? I get it. But it seems to me that when I was in my 20s, most of my friends and colleagues were getting married. We all seemed to kind of do it around the same time in our lives in our 20s. And then, of course, in our 30s, we started buying homes and having kids. We actually had a home in our 20s. And actually, I had my daughter before I got married, so we were a little ahead of the game. But for the most part, we're kind of all doing this around the same timeline. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I'm old enough now to have realized some of the people who got married around my time period. I've also lived long enough to see them get divorced and remarried to other people. I mean, with the same quote unquote love. So there's no clear indication, for example, that because I stayed married and didn't get divorced that I love my spouse any more than anyone else. There's no clear indication because someone got divorced once, twice, or thrice that they are any less lovable or know any more or less about love. The point is there's no real clear indication because everything is so subjective, but it's good information to know, particularly as a young person or a person that is considering marriage, considering long-term relationship. It's very difficult to discern when you're young your feelings, I think. I think it takes a lot of life for you to be able to make wise decisions. And that's the goal. Make wise decisions. And I just think you have to have a certain amount of life, lessons, opportunities to display your ability to learn, to data gather, information gather, make some mistakes before you can become wise. You just don't come out of the womb wise. So as it relates to love, infatuation is one of the aspects of that emotion that I think a lot of people confuse with love. People I've seen, my experience has been, even I know this to be true, at the offset of a relationship is usually the best time because that person's new to you, you're new to them. Let's say you're coming out of an old relationship going to a new one. Man, it's like a breath of fresh air, especially if it's someone that you're attracted to and someone that is different than your prior. Then you just think, oh my God, this is so great. You become infatuated. Well, you sort of get that feeling each time you go into a new relationship. Well, you'll notice that at some point that wears off. That wears off. So it's important to understand that infatuation isn't love. Although here they're saying love is infatuation. And again, I just don't agree. What about compatibility in love? When all said and done, love is also about compatibility. Now, this part I do agree with. When you break down and analyze different relationships, one of the key factors is how compatible the two partners are. That's probably the best part of this article and the truest part, particularly if you're interested in being in a long-term type of life relationship. Your compatibility and your commitment is, I think, at the offset, more valuable than your emotions. Why do I say this? Because your emotions are going to come and go. So let me tell you something about you that you may not know, particularly if you're young. You're going to change. You're going to change your clothes. You're going to change where you live, your address. You're going to change your jobs. You're going to change your mind. You're going to change emotions. And you may at some point change partners. But you don't even know what you're going to do, let alone what someone else is going to do. And to suggest that you do is a clear indication of your naiveness. You don't know what is going to happen. So your commitment long term to a person, your compatibility is very key at the beginning, not how you necessarily feel. Now, I'm not suggesting you marry somebody that you don't like. That's not what I'm saying. But we put the cart before the horse. We prioritize this love. Why? Because like the article said, for the most part, many of us are in love with a few things. One, the idea of being in love. We're in love with the idea of being in love. We're in love with the idea of being in a relationship, of being married, of fulfilling this picture we've already had in our head, put in our head. Many of us have that. I had it. So those are the things we're shooting for. And so I've seen people marry people they're not necessarily, they don't even really like, but they like the idea of people coming to their wedding, particularly women. They love the idea of people paying attention to them, seeing their wedding pictures and all these sorts of things. All that's great. Well, all that's temporal. All that's temporary. At some point, you're going to be into the marriage, and that person's going to be there every day. Every day. So it's, for me, someone who's been married almost 25 years, I would say that your commitment and your compatibility is most important. I can use myself as an example. Before my wife and I got married, we were together. And listen, everybody's different. I'm not saying you got to use my formula to be right. I'm not talking right or wrong. I'm just giving you my story. Some people can meet and then tomorrow they get married and they stay together the rest of their lives. I'm sure that's happened to some degree. I don't know many stories that way, but I'm not discounting it. For me and my wife, we're together about 2 years or so. Almost 3 years. As a matter of fact, I told you we had a child before we got married. So my daughter was 2 years old actually in our wedding. So we had a home, we had a daughter. We were together every day to the point where people would be her friends or my friends, particularly her friends. Don't you get tired of him? Like, don't you want to go and do other stuff? And the answer was not really. I mean, sometimes we would go and do other stuff without each other. But for the most part, we were so compatible and we enjoyed each other's company that it just seemed fine just to be. We didn't want to not be with each other. No one was forcing anyone. We both had separate places to live, but we wanted to be together. She never rushed me about getting married. I never rushed her. It just was a thing where I missed my girlfriend and wife whenever she was away from me, and I really did. Like I found myself in the company of people thinking I would much rather be with my wife, with my girlfriend, not like once or twice, excuse me, but most of the time. Why? Because I enjoyed her company. I never thought deeply about, do I love her or not? I just let it be what it was. If you guys have different professional football teams, that's one thing. But if you can't agree on which type of church you're going to go to, or if you're going to raise your child in a particular religion or not, homeschool or public school or private school, if you are someone, let's say, for example, you're Republican, she's Democrat, those are not very compatible. I don't see a lot of longevity there. I'm sure there's somewhere a Republican and a Democrat living together, but these last few years, there hadn't been anything sweet. I'm just saying, compatibility is a key component to longevity if you're looking for a long-term relationship. Commitment as well. Why? Because your feelings, unbeknownst to you, particularly if you're young, they're going to change. They're going to come and they're going to go. But there will be commitment and compatibility that can hold you in there until you can discern what's happening with you. I hope that's clear. So anyway, let's talk about more chemistry. Is love all in the mind? Is it in the heart or in the mind? Because many people debate am I in love with this person because I'm in love with the idea of love, or are there some chemical changes going on in my brain, in my body, in my heart that affect the way I feel about certain individuals? So let's talk about that. So there was a study, groundbreaking experiment, they're calling it. There was the university, Stony Brook University in New York, put 37 people who were supposedly madly in love into an MRI scanner to scan their brains. So they get 37 folks, they're couples, and they begin to decipher what's going on inside when they say they're in love. The work showed that romantic love causes surges of activity in the brain areas that are rich in dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical. Dopamine. These included the caudoid nucleus, part of the reward system, and an ancient brain area called the ventral tegmental area. The ventral tegmental area, or VTA. So the VTA is part of the reptilian core of the brain. It's associated with wanting, with motivation, with focus, and craving. Okay. Similar brain areas light up during the rush of euphoria after, for example, taking drugs like cocaine. So the suggestion here is being in love causes these sorts of chemicals to flood that part of the brain, that part of the body. So is it a total eclipse of the head or of the heart? Am I feeling this way through my heart, or is it what's happening from a chemistry standpoint in my brain? Well, actually, in the case of science imitating poetry, the heart has been found to influence the way we experience emotion. The heart has been. Our brain and our heart are known to be in close communication. When faced with a threat, or even if we spot the object of our affection in a crowded room, our heart begins to race. That's personally happened to me. I would pick up, I'm going to burden you with all my stories now. I would pick up my wife every day from work. We actually met at work. I was in college, she was in college, and we worked at a retail store. And by this time, I had graduated and was working a corporate job, but she still worked retail, so I would pick her up at night from the store. And I just remember seeing her, having not seen her all day, when I would see her, it would just, because I was thinking about it all day, and finally get to see her, I noticed a difference in the way that I felt. Recently, scientists have turned the tables and shown that feedback from our heart to our brain also influences what we are feeling. Feedback from our heart to our brain. So according to Shakespeare, he wrote, "Love is merely madness, a madness." It was only recently that scientists have offered an explanation for why being in love may be considered unusual, quote, behavior. Donatella Mazzariti, a professor, I'm sure I've mispronounced it, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Pisa in Italy, approached this question after carrying out research showing that people with obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, have on average lower levels of brain chemical called serotonin in their blood. She wondered whether a similar imbalance could underlie romantic infatuation. Okay, stay with me. We're talking about how chemical induction into the body or reduction could affect how you behave. She recruited people with OCD, healthy controls, and 20 people who had embarked on a romantic relationship within the previous 6 months. It was also specified that they should not have had sexual intercourse, which is very important, and that at least 4 hours a day were spent thinking of a partner. Both the OCD group and the volunteers who were in love had significantly lower levels of serotonin. And the authors concluded that being in love literally induces a state which is, quote, not normal. When the in love group were followed up 6 months later, most of their serotonin levels had returned to normal. A separate study found that people in love had much lower activity in their frontal cortex as well, an area of their brain crucial to reason and judgment. When they thought of their loved one, so your frontal cortex. Scientists have speculated an evolutionary reason for this, and they termed it, quote, beer goggles, the beer goggles theory, or the beer goggles effect. You've heard of this. The suspension of reason. The suspension of reason, which makes coupling and procreation far more likely. So, we started off with one question: what is love? And Kelly, you've ended up making me have many, many more questions, not only about what is love, but what is infatuation, what does chemistry have to do with it all, and compatibility and commitment. It seems like you prioritize this over love. I'm just going to summarize this with my personal life experience and hopes that you can take all of this information and make the best decision for you and, continue to do some research. The first thing I would say is to be able to distinguish the difference between love and lust. And I'll say this, and this is going to sound a little biased, sexually biased, but I think women have a better handle on distinguishing love versus lust. Why? Because for many men, we're driven by our sexual appetites. So lust usually ends up in sexual intercourse for us. And then sexual intercourse usually generates emotions which we try to pretend like we don't have, but we do. And we then begin to confuse our desire to have sex with someone with the idea of actually loving them. I can't say definitively if women have the same issue. My experience shows me no, but I don't know every woman in the world. I'm only telling you about men and myself mainly. I was a distinct difference between being in a relationship with someone, not having intercourse with them, and being able to discern how you feel about them with a clear vision, as opposed to the lust factor, or having had sexual intercourse, having enjoyed it, having wanting to replicate this activity again and again and again, and not wanting to share that with anyone else, wanting to keep it to yourself, and then becoming on some level obsessed or territorial to the point where, yes, relationship seems like the best way to keep this woman to myself, or marriage seems like the best way to keep this to myself. You don't want to go down that road. That road ends in divorce. But I could see how men could do it, because it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Men are visual creatures. And although you may have a stunning personality and a beautiful wit, and you can tell the best jokes, no one knows that from across the room. He's not walking over towards you because you look like you can tell a joke. He's doing it because he's attracted to you. And normally attraction for men is sexual desire. So anyway, off into the weeds I go. The first thing is distinguish love versus lust. Younger love versus aged or commitment over time. So these are some things to consider as well. I do think there's something to, if you want to be married, and this is a custom that is that you think you want to continue with, in your life, in your personal space. Marriage is something that you want to do. I would say consider commitment, consider most importantly compatibility, with the clear understanding that over time, he's going to change, she's going to change, I'm going to change. And if we're compatible, if we're committed to this, then we can still be together even when we're going through changes. because there will be some time. Let me tell you, the infatuation thing, that doesn't last very long at all. Matter of fact, I think most people, by the time they get married, the infatuation's already gone, because that's a dating thing. Like the first 3 months, I tell people all the time, if you're dating and you're high strung over somebody, give it about 3 months. Infatuation usually lasts, less than 3 months. So after infatuation, then you can get into really knowing who the other person is, knowing who you are around them, and begin to understand if you guys are compatible or not. Let me tell you why that's important. I'll give you another personal example. So I used to get really, really upset. I purchased a car for my wife years ago, and it was such a great car. I really kind of wanted the car myself, but I gave it to my wife. She needed it at the time, and I thought, man, this would be a great car that I've always wanted. So I thought, man, I'm gonna give it to her. Oh my gosh, she French fries in the seat, ketchup on the floor. It just wasn't well kept, and I would get so upset. And I had a friend of mine at work that said, listen, either you're going to stop talking about this or divorce her already, because this is enough. Like, I was going on that much about it. So I decided that I would just accept my wife for who she was. Part of who she is she just doesn't keep areas tidy all the time. We don't live in a pigsty, don't get me wrong, but her car wasn't clean. And so here's what I recollected. And this goes back to the article I was reading you about your frontal cortex and about you not being normal when you're in these states and having all these chemicals. Remember I told you my heart would race when I see her and all this stuff? Well, you got to know that she had a disposition for being untidy when we were dating. I just overlooked it. I just overlooked it. I just didn't pay attention to it. Why? Because I was paying attention to her. I was paying attention to the parts of her that I wanted to see. And that's what you will realize being married as long as I have. So my point is, in proving one of these studies right, at least, that the beer goggles theory is correct. I think when you're infatuated and you're in those early stages of love and so much dopamine is in your system, you feel so good when you're with this person that you're willing to unconsciously overlook some things that after 10 years, 7 years, it may get to you. And so realize it now as you listen to this podcast, that that's probably the most scientific part of all this study. That I'm going to change, they're going to change, and I need to be prepared for that in a long-term relationship. So, do I believe in love at first sight? We talked about that earlier. No, I do not. Do I believe that there's one person for, a perfect person for everyone? No. Why? Because you're going to change. You're not going to be the same Sally at 20 as you will be at 30, as you will be at 40. You're going to change. So you're going to be a different Sally, and he's going to be a different Mike. Again, the compatibility and the commitment is what's going to keep Sally and Mike together. Their feelings may come and go, but the compatibility and the commitment will keep them together. So, Kelly, are you suggesting that I stay in a relationship with someone who I don't love? No, absolutely not. But I am telling you that it is almost impossible. I am telling you. I had grandparents that were married into their, 50th years, 60th years, stuff like aunts and uncles who've been married, 60 and 65 years. Certainly you realize that you're not going to stay together for 65 years and not go through a period where you don't like the other person. There's going to be a little downtime on your emotions. It's going to be ebbs and flows. And you have to take that seriously. Otherwise, you're going to be lumped into this huge divorce population that we have. I think this is what happens, quite honestly, and I'm closing out. I think, quite honestly, when people's infatuation goes and these feelings go, then they go. Because they believe that's what relationships are, just feelings. And there's more to it. If you believe in long-term relationships. I don't even say marriage because I know marriage has prehistoric and intent in terms of how it was designed and why it was designed, and we'll have a podcast and talk about that. But if you believe in this concept and you want to stay in a long-term relationship, then you've got to know that changes are afoot. No one stays the same. Everything is constantly moving and changing, including you. Well, I hope that you've learned something today. This was actually informative. I've wanted to do this for a while. I just didn't know how to do it and bring it to you, and I hope I hadn't muddied the water too much. And it was something that, if nothing else, challenges you to go out and do a little bit of investigating on your own. Why don't you query your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner? Why don't you talk to your currently if you're married, talk to your spouse. If you're in a long-term relationship thinking about getting married, talk to your boyfriend or your partner or your girlfriend, whoever. Talk to your siblings, talk to people who you know who are married, and challenge some of these ideas and try to make the best decision for you. Because as there's a number of definitions for the word love, there also are a number of different people who this could fit. Some people disposition could put them in one category, others in a different category. So anyway, thank you for joining me on Things You Should Know. This has been our discussion on what is love. Again, so many people are Googling this each month, and I hope that I provided some level of insight. It's been my pleasure to host you here at Things You Should Know, and I look forward to seeing you, talking to you in 48 hours, 2 days. Thank you, guys.